Hello, everyone. This is Tom from VoIP Supply. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us here for the Grandstream webinar. I do have Chris and Hugh from Grandstream to go over some of the new, latest, and greatest information, new stuff coming up from Grandstream. Looks like we did lose our slide at the moment, so let's see if we can get that back up there.
Yep, I'll get it back up.
Okay, perfect. I do apologize about that. So as I said, I believe Hugh will be presenting for the most part, going over some of the provisioning of Grandstream devices for you. If we could, next slide. And during the webinar, if you do have any questions, please feel free to click on the Q&A bubble down in the lower right-hand corner, a little bubble like you'd see in a comic book with the letter Q in it. You click on that, post your question. We will address any and all questions at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. So who is VoIP Supply? In a nutshell, VoIP Supply is North America's leading VoIP solutions provider. Been around since 2002, have serviced over 125,000 customers. There's a picture of our fantastic team right there. We provide a host of different services. Have been doing this for a very long time. We have very high-level skilled people here within our solutions consultant team that can assist in speccing out any solution you might have, as well as an engineering team provisioning and everything to get a perfect solution out to you the first time. Next slide, please. So some of the reseller benefits, we do have our VoIP rental program. You can inquire with us more on that. Pretty simple to fill out the form, get things going, and get approved for a rental agreement. We do have hardware and provisioning, as I kind of mentioned prior, which kind of falls and ties right in with our fulfillment program. You do not have to be involved in the fulfillment program to do provisioning, but it ties right into it. So getting something pre-configured out to your customer, blind drop shipped, ready to go, plug and play, pre-provisioned to your service or the service provider that you are reselling. So your customer does not have any issues and is going to lower the amount of time you're going to have to spend on site at your customer's site. We do have our Cloud Spam Marketplace where you could sign up to become a reseller from one of the partners of ours that we are master agent for. We are master agents for a bunch of different service providers these days, so we can talk about that more in depth. If you would like to contact us directly, we can go over and maybe find the best fit for you, or maybe even a couple different providers to provide you with a couple different solutions. We also have our Refresh and Reclaim program, which is going to save you money on refurbished products. So if you need to put out product instead of buying new, you could buy our refresh. Comes with a full 1-year warranty through us, just like most manufacturers are going to provide 1 year. And we also have our reclaim program where we can offer you some cash for existing product that you have that you may be pulling out and replacing with new product. It's not universal. We don't just buy everything, but let us know what you got. We can let you know if we can make an offer. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Hugh and Chris, and I hope you enjoy it. Take it away.
Cool, thanks, Tom. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. For those who haven't had the pleasure of ever meeting, my name is Hugh Nguyen, and I am the Director of Support for Grandstream for the North America and the Asia Pacific regions. Very excited to be here. The topic for today is going to be provisioning Grandstream devices. We are going to get a little bit techie, so I hope I could try to keep it as entertaining as possible for everyone. It probably doesn't hurt that I was born and raised in Southern California, so I already have a very laid-back demeanor to begin with. I just recently moved to Texas about 6 months ago, to the northeast side of Texas, and now I speak even slower, and I'll be speaking slowly on a technical topic. So I'll do my best to keep it relevant for everyone. Provisioning, it doesn't seem like an exciting topic, but if you have been in the tech field for a while, provisioning is, in my opinion, probably one of the more exciting topics because it just makes everyone's life easier. And just to go over some benefits of product provisioning, you guys probably are already aware of all of the benefits, but some of the benefits, some of the highlights that I thought about, include the ability to automatically configure all of your devices without ever having to physically touch them. For those who have the, uh, the luck of the draw of ever having to install 200 or 300 phones on a weekend, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. The traditional way without auto provisioning would be unpackaging all of these phones one by one, logging into the interface, configuring them, and the worst part is having to repackage everything because every time you take something out of the box, it never goes back the same way. With automatic configuration, it helps eliminate that whole process. So all you do is just ship these devices out or show up on premise, unpackage them and plug them in. Makes life a lot easier. Another benefit for product provisioning, it's again just in the process that we just described. It just makes that whole deployment process a lot quicker, and it allows you to deploy a lot of devices at the same time. I mentioned hundreds, but we've had deployments where there were thousands of devices, and the amount of time and resources that it would take to manually deploy thousands of devices, it's unfathomable. And of course, the whole provisioning process makes everything just plug and play. Just take the phones out of the box, plug them in, and you're ready to go. Now with Grandstream, though, we do have several different methods of provisioning. I think Grandstream does have one of the most flexible provisioning options in the industry. And we'll cover some of them today. The main ones that we're going to cover are the configuration files, as well as some of our platforms such as GAPS and GDMS, which I'll talk into more detail later. But some of the options that we have, of course, you are able to use the web interface for all of the devices to configure them. It's not really provisioning, but that's one way to configure the devices. The most long-standing method is using XML and name-based XML configuration files. That's probably one of the most popular ways to provision Grandstream devices. We do have our cloud-based services, the GDMS now, which is slowly overtaking, I wouldn't say slowly, I would say quickly overtaking the traditional provisioning methods. We also have the ability to provision devices using TR69, it's industry standard. All of our devices support TR69, especially on our IP endpoints. It's standard protocol, so it'll work with any other ACS servers out there, not just Grandstream. We also have a redirection service called GAPS. Actually, GAPS stands for Grandstream Automated Provisioning Server. At one point in time, probably about 12, 13 years ago, we were using it for auto provisioning of devices, but it eventually evolved into mainly a redirection service. Primarily because a lot of these platforms that we interact with, they already have built-in provisioning mechanisms, and so what GAPS allows our phones to do is just redirect over to those existing platforms so that system administrators don't have to run multiple systems at the same time. Our most recent addition is the GDMS, as mentioned. We do have a cloud-based version called gdms.cloud and a software version called gdms.local. With the cloud, you can access that anywhere you have a web browser or a mobile phone. We have mobile applications available for that platform as well. Completely free to use. Each account has a hard limit of 1 million devices per account, so hopefully that should be plenty. We do have the gdms.local platform, which is a software version of the GDMS cloud that allows you to install onto a local server that you administer on your own, which gives you full control over the whole deployment process, including all of the security aspects of the server. Now, with all of these provisioning methods that we have available, one thing that we keep in mind at all times is the security side of things. All of these methods have security built right in from the get-go, because we know that voice hacking is very prevalent and can be very, very costly. These are some of the options that we have. I think in order for us to really understand how Grandstream devices provision, we probably need to start all the way at the beginning and kind of understand how these devices operate from a default factory default state. When it boots up, what does it actually do? So that's kind of where we're going to spend some time right now to explore that section. I think once we understand that part, then understanding how gaps and GDMS fits in, it gives you a whole picture of the whole process. So let's do that. In terms of provisioning, again, we have several different ways that the devices provision. Some file types that our devices support, of course, are our binary configuration files. Some of you may be familiar with this type of file. It's a legacy type file that all of our devices still support because we just have millions of devices out there right now that are still using this file format. It's a very simple text-based format that is encrypted using a proprietary version of AES 128. So all of the files, all of the configurations on there are protected in a sense. But we've been moving over to an XML based configuration file format, which is great because with XML files, it allows you to encrypt it even further. All of our devices are able to accept XML files that are encrypted with AES 256, so even better security. But what we did with our XML configuration files is we took all of our previous configuration terminology. We call them p-values. A p-value is basically a configuration item. So any item that you are able to configure, such as an account username, would have an associated p-value with it. Now that we've been doing it for such a long time and we have so many different devices, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different p-values available, and it gets a little confusing. So we've been most recently, updating all of our devices to support an alias-based XML configuration files, which is also an XML format, but instead of using p-values, we actually use names that relate to the item that you want to configure. For example, account name could be something. In terms of p-values, it's probably like P207 or something like that. Whereas with an alias-based XML format, it'll be account1.account name, something more human readable. So it's much easier to read and understand instead of having to cross-reference against a template of p-values. I've been with Grandstream for 13 years. I still don't know what all the p-values are, nor would I ever want to know. There's just too many of them. So those are the type of files that our devices support. And within those type of files, there are several versions of the files, I guess, that the devices support by default. And I'll explain why this is important in a little bit, but some of the file names that we support are, of course, the individual device files, the individual device binary files. Those typically have the format CFG followed by the MAC address of the device. And that's a binary file that you can use our generator to encrypt with a proprietary AES 128. We then have the individual device XML files, which is a very similar file name format, CFG, followed by the MAC address, but that's in .xml. Now this is straight XML format, all straight text. Everything is readable, but you can also encrypt it using AES-256 to give it a little bit more security. Another file name that we support is the model template. This is an XML file, typically with the name CFG, followed by the model name of the device, .xml. This is a file that can be used, that can hold common settings that pertain to a particular model of device. For example, if you have a GRP 2602, for example, you can have a model template for that, and then you can also have a model template for a WP810. Those are fairly different devices with different configuration settings. But if you have common settings that you want to deploy throughout your deployment, you can use these model templates to load those common settings, and then use the individual devices, the individual device configuration files to load particular settings for that individual device, such as the account name, account password, and whatnot. And lastly, we do have also a global template, and that file name format is cfg.xml. And just as the name says, it's something that is common globally amongst your deployment that all devices should have. And this is something that you can use to use that. And to take a look at how some of these files look, we have our configuration templates, the binary templates. You can download these on our website under the support page under tools. We have templates for all of our models on there, and these templates will include all of the p-values for every conceivable configurable option. I'm not sure if you can see on your screen there if it's big enough, but like for example, you see P237. That is the p-value that correlates with the config server path. And so on and so forth. You see a whole list. In our templates, we do put commentary in there. Any characters that go after the hash symbol, that's a comment. So those are not taken by the phones. Those are ignored. Anything that starts with a P and a number on its own line will be considered an option. So just for example, a simple binary file might look like this. P271 equals 0. I think that's account active. P270 is the account name. P237 is the config server path. And so you just put down your p-value equals, and then the value that you want it to equal. And each configuration item gets its own line. So it's very simple, very basic. The best thing about having such simple text files is the file sizes are a lot smaller. Although these days, I don't think any of us have to worry about bandwidth for these type of file exchanges in the network. Now the XML configuration files is very similar. It's just everything is in an XML format, so you have your opening and ending tags. But again, every configuration item has its own p-value, but because it's in XML format, they are enclosed in tags, an opening and ending tag. So if you see there, you have your P271 opening tag, followed by the value, followed by the closing of the P271 tag. So very similar, just different format. People like this format because it's an industry standard, so that if you ever wanted to use an online tool to verify if your format is correct, you can just plug it in there. And because it is your XML format, you'll be able to double check that and cross-reference it and make sure everything is good to go. And this is great. You can take this XML file and then encrypt it using AES-256 to make it extra secure. But on our alias-based XML, which is new, I guess fairly new. All of the GRPs support that now. We're working on updating all of our older devices to support this alias-based XML as well. As you can see, it of course follows your standard XML format, but instead of using p-values, we're using tag names. Like if you see on line 4950 there, the name for the config server path is provisioning.config.serverpath. The first part of that name lists what category this item is, and then the following words signify what the item actually is within that category. So it makes it a lot easier. If you don't know or remember all of our p-values, you can just open up one of these name-based alias and know exactly what a configuration item is just by its name. It's common. It's common name, so that everyone will understand. So this is where all of Grandstream devices are going to move to in the future. That gives you a kind of a glimpse of what these files look like, and I did draw a little diagram here of kind of how our devices will look for these files when they boot up. We have it in this diagram, a new device there on the top left. Once it boots up, the first thing it's going to look for is your XML file, configuration file, which is the CFG followed by the MAC address .xml. After it searches for that, it's going to search for the binary configuration file, just so that it's backwards compatible for all of our devices. After that, the third step, it'll look for the model template, which is, in this case, CFG followed by the model name, GXP1628.xml. And then lastly, it looks for the global template, which is CFG.xml. And once it goes through this process, if it finds any of those files, it'll apply them all, and you now have a fully provisioned phone. So that kind of gives you an idea, or a little history and understanding of how things work out in the background. That'll make a lot of sense once you look into how GAPS and GDMS fits into the whole process. We talk about GAPS and GDMS all the time, and all of our devices, from a factory default state, when they boot up, they are going to contact GAPS and GDMS. And in this order, number one, when it boots up, it will contact GAPS. When it contacts GAPS, it's going to ask for these configuration items. And by default, GAPS does not have any configuration for any device. This is something that you will have to enter if you have a GAPS account, or one of our partners, such as VoIP Supply, can add that in there for you. After it contacts GAPS, it'll then contact GDMS in a similar fashion, because with GDMS, it doesn't necessarily do the config files. It's more of a TR69 deployment, but the idea is the same. It's going to contact GDMS and try to get all of its config through there. Now with GAPS, I want to talk a little bit more about GAPS, because GAPS and GDMS, people might ask, well, why do you have two systems? Or why do you still have GAPS, since GDMS is a much newer system and has more capability? Well, there are situations where you would need both. And that's kind of what I want to talk about next, kind of where GAPS fits in and where GDMS fits in. Now with GAPS, I mentioned earlier, it's really used as a redirection service. Because most of the larger deployments, they already have their own platform. They already have their own provisioning mechanisms. For example, if the customer is using 3CX, for example, 3CX has its own automated provisioning platform where they don't need the full capabilities of GDMS. All they need to do is for the phones to know to contact their server to get all of the provisioning items. And so GAPS is best suited, I think, for those type of situations, because most people don't want to administer two different systems at the same time. If they can centralize everything, It'll make their lives easier. Again, a lot of the times, when you're dealing with larger institutions, they just don't want to host things off their own network. They want to have full control over all of the security aspects of the deployment, especially for companies like maybe financial institutions where they have strict security policies in place. They're not allowed to use cloud-based services, for example. This is this is great for them because they can host all of the configuration files on their premises, on their servers, but then use GAPs to just redirect everything there, so that when the phone does boot up, it'll then redirect over to their services, and then they have full control over all aspects there. And with GAPs, as with GAPs and GDMS, it really provides a no-touch way for our devices to be redirected and provisioned. That's what we're trying to achieve. We don't want to open up the box of the phones when we deploy them. And GAPS also has a pretty extensive API for automation, and also integration into our customer systems. Like VoIP Supply, for example. VoIP Supply is using an API. Whenever an order is placed, their API talks to GAPS, gets those devices redirected automatically. So again, we're eliminating the human aspect of the provisioning process, just to eliminate any human errors or any potential errors. So that's where I see GAPS fitting in. GDMS also has a place, and it's quickly taken over all of the duties of GAPS for those customers who are able to use cloud-based services when it comes down to security policies. Because GDMS it can technically do everything that GAPS does and a lot more. With GDMS, you're able to fully manage the complete ecosystem. If you wanted to use GDMS just for redirection, you could definitely do that too. But there's just so much more that you can do with GDMS. Probably one of the most important things, in my opinion, that GDMS can do is it gives you the ability to remotely troubleshoot your devices. You can capture Wireshark traces and syslogs remotely through GDMS. This makes it so much easier. I guess I've been here for quite a long time when we still used to use Ethernet hubs for Wireshark captures. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. Everything can be done through the GDMS platform. It makes our life so much easier. With GDMS, we do have cloud-based and on-prem options. As mentioned, we have the GDMS.cloud, which is fully managed by Grandstream. We use the AWS backbone for high resiliency and availability, make sure that it's always available. And we also do have those on-prem options, the software-based package that people can install and manage it on their own. And with the cloud-based option, a lot of people don't think of it this way, but on the cloud-based, if you're using our cloud platform, you're not spending your time, resources, and manpower to maintain all those servers that you have. Right? Grandstream does all that. AWS does all that. If you're deploying it on-prem, you're going to have your experienced engineer first install the server and also maintain the server and worry about security all the time. At the end of the day, it does save you an organization money on the deployment of this provisioning system. And we just want to really give the customer full control, the customer or the system integrator, full control of the system, whether it's locking down devices or just getting the provision for the first time. And GDMS will be able to do all of that. And just to give you a couple of ideas on some common scenarios, how how gaps is used. And I'm only going to use gaps as an illustration because GDMS could easily fit in these illustrations. So you can take out the gaps picture and put in the GDMS picture if you want. But with gaps, commonly, we have two popular scenarios. One is customers with existing platforms, like I mentioned earlier, whether maybe they're using a 3CX system or they're deploying their own soft switch, right? Their existing platforms already do all of the provisioning. They really don't want to use GDMS to complicate things, right? So in that particular scenario, let's say the partner purchases a device through VoIP Supply. And with VoIP Supply, I mentioned earlier, they already have all of the API integration with gaps. So their systems will automatically place an API call over to gaps to get everything pre-provisioned, redirected for you. And VoIP Supply just ships out the product to you or directly to the end customer. And as soon as they plug them in, the phone over from the end customer will contact gaps, get all of this configuration, and it's done. At no point in this process does the partner have to manually touch the phone. And that's kind of where we want things to go. It makes everything easier. Another common scenario, and this is kind of where VoIP Supply fits in because they do offer the full service, with the complete 3PL, with the packaging, the shipping, the drop shipping. In this particular scenario, very similar to what we just spoke about. The partner orders the product with VoIP Supply, API calls out to gaps for the redirection. VoIP Supply ships the product directly to your customer, and as soon as they plug it in, they're good to go and fully provisioned. And those are the two most common scenarios that we see. The third one would be customers or the end customers that are more tech savvy. They just buy devices and plug them into their own GDMS account, and they just handle it from there. But the goal of the whole provisioning aspect for Grandstream devices is just to make it a lot easier. Not just easier, but being that everything is automated, it eliminates a lot of the human error aspects of the process. So you can ensure that you have a consistent experience with deployments throughout the whole process with the customers. Boy, I hope I didn't bore you guys to death, but that's I think that's about it for today in terms of the tech items. I'll pass it back to Tom here for some closing words. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat window or through the Q&A box through the IPv2 Tech platform. Thanks for listening to me, guys.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I had a little difficulty. It wouldn't come off mute. But I do appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you, Hugh, for all the great information. I did have a question here for you, Hugh, regarding provisioning, but more so looking at, looks like the UCM series PBXs. They were asking if you have pre-existing configuration files for the UCM 6200 series. Are you able to use those configuration files for the UCM 6300 series?
Great question. Yeah, actually, through the GDMS platform, if you add your UCM 6200 series to there, you will see through that interface a convert button that you can convert the backup configuration on a UCM 6200 over to a UCM 6300. So you can do it that way. Another way is to send it over to our tech team through the help desk or through Partner Connect. Simply just let us know that you want our help to convert that backup file. Attach your backup file to your ticket, and we'll send back a converted file for you.
Great. Thank you very much. Let's see here. I'm not seeing any other questions. So I do appreciate your time today, Hugh and Chris. Always a pleasure. Appreciate the partnership with you guys. Uh, for many of you, maybe don't know, we have been partnered with Grandstream essentially since the beginning. So we have a long-term relationship. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. If you already have a rep and you know their contact info, of course, reach out to your rep directly. If you don't have a rep, I can be your rep, and I can definitely help you out with any and all solutions you may require. Again, thank you to everybody for taking time out of your day. Thank you, Hugh and Chris, for taking time out of your day. And I look forward to the next time we can meet.
Thanks again for joining, everybody. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.